The coffee was already on the table when I sat down. Lukewarm, paper cup. The cafe smelled like burned espresso and lemon cleaner. Ellen didn't ask what I wanted. She just slid the cup toward me and folded her hands like we were about to pray. She said my name first, calm, practiced. Then she said, "This isn't about your performance." I remember nodding before she finished the sentence, not because I agreed, but because I'd learned that nodding bought you time. Silence, when you used it right, made people keep talking. She explained that the company was entering a new phase, that leadership needed a different background, that Mark had the experience to take things forward. Mark had been there 9 months. I had trained him on our systems. I'd corrected his client emails. The week before, he'd asked me how to pull a basic performance report. I thanked her for the coffee anyway. My hands had gone numb, but my voice didn't shake. I said I understood. I didn't cry until later, in the third-floor bathroom where the hand dryer never worked and the walls were thick enough that no one heard anything. That meeting was 7 months ago. There's a printed email sitting in a folder on my desk right now. I didn't know it existed that day. I didn't even know I'd need it, but it's part of why I'm telling this story. I joined Northline Digital when there were 6 of us sharing a converted storage space on the edge of Columbus. No windows. Folding desks, one space heater that tripped the breaker if you looked at it wrong. I was 30, tired, quietly determined. I'd just left a firm where long hours were treated like loyalty and silence was the safest currency. Caleb, the founder, talked fast and believed everything was possible. He promised growth, autonomy, and a seat at the table if I helped build something real. For a long time, he kept those promises. I built the client intake process from scratch. I wrote the pitch decks. I hired and trained the first account managers. When we landed our first 7-figure client, we ate grocery store cake off paper plates. Someone played music from a phone speaker. It felt honest then. For 3 years, my job grew quietly. Titles changed. Responsibilities expanded. I stopped counting hours and started counting systems. Things worked because I made them work. Then the funding arrived. With it came glass offices, a board, and Ellen. She was introduced as bringing structure. Her first week, she walked the floor with a tablet, smiling, asking questions that sounded curious but landed like evaluations. She told me she admired what I'd built. She said it while standing, never sitting down. Within weeks, she reorganized my department. New tools, new reporting layers, weekly feedback sessions where I was told my tone was approachable, but maybe too familiar. I adjusted. I always had. What she didn't touch were the relationships, the quiet ones, the kind built over years, not slides, the ones that didn't live in the CRM. That mattered later. At the time, I didn't know how much. I just knew that after the coffee meeting, I went back to my desk, closed my laptop, and stared at the wall until the office lights dimmed automatically. Then I went home. That night, I didn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I opened my laptop and bought a domain with my name on it. No plan, no announcement. I shut the computer, then I waited. The next morning, nothing looked different. Same badge swipe, same desk, same calendar reminders stacked back to back. The only change was that my title had already been updated in the system before I arrived. Someone efficient had handled that overnight. Mark stopped by around 10. He hovered, unsure whether to sit. He thanked me for being supportive during the transition. He said Ellen wanted us to have a clean handoff. He used that phrase twice, like it had been rehearsed. I told him it was fine. I meant that it would be. For the first week, I did what I'd always done. I showed up on time. I answered questions. I forwarded documents. When Mark asked where certain processes lived, I sent him links. When he asked why a client preferred weekly calls instead of dashboards, I explained it without commentary. At lunch, conversations shifted. People lowered their voices. A few avoided eye contact. A few checked in quietly, asking if I was okay, then apologizing for asking. I told them I was fine. At home, my apartment stayed dark. I ate whatever was easiest. I didn't call anyone. I didn't vent. I started writing things down instead. Dates, meeting times, who said what. Not because I planned to use it, because writing gave shape to the days. 2 weeks after the demotion, we closed a major deal I'd been working on for months, a regional venture group with several early-stage companies. The contract was worth just over $5 million spread across 3 years. At the all-hands meeting, Caleb opened champagne. Ellen called it a team win. Mark stood beside her, nodding. I clapped when everyone else did. My hands moved automatically. 3 days later, Ellen invited me to coffee. Different cafe, same tone. She told me the new structure was working well. She said leadership felt confident about the direction. She asked how I was adjusting. I said I was learning. She smiled, like that was the correct answer. That night, I printed my employment agreement and read it slowly. Every clause, every definition, I highlighted what mattered. I put the pages into a folder and slid it into a drawer. Then I opened a blank document and wrote 3 lines. Step 1, do exactly what is required. Step 2, document everything. Step 3, don't rush. I followed those steps carefully. During the day, I stayed inside the lines. I didn't approach clients. I didn't hint at anything. I didn't complain. After hours, I worked quietly. I built a simple website, clean language, no client names, no claims I couldn't back up. I registered the business, opened an account, and paid for everything with my own savings. I didn't tell anyone at Northline. The first message came from a client, not me. Hey, quick question. Are you still our main contact? The org chart looks different. I replied with neutral language. Company growth, role changes, all positive. 2 days later, the same client called. Mark had spent most of the meeting talking about metrics that didn't matter to them. He'd missed a key product update. He'd used a generic label where there should have been a name. I listened. I didn't correct him. When the client asked if I was staying, I said I was evaluating my options. There was a pause on the line. Let me know if you ever want to grab coffee, he said. Just to catch up. I said, okay. I put the phone face down. Then I waited. That coffee happened on a Saturday morning. Neutral place, loud enough to feel casual, quiet enough to talk without leaning in. He didn't bring a laptop. Neither did I. That mattered. We talked about his company first, then the market, then people we both knew who'd burned out too early. It stayed comfortably general. At the end, he mentioned 3 startups outside his venture group, small teams, underfunded, good ideas with no structure. They're not ready for an agency, he said carefully. But they need someone who understands foundations. I nodded once. No promises, no enthusiasm, just acknowledgement. The first contract I signed was modest, nights and weekends only, clear scope, clear boundaries. I kept everything separated, different laptop, different email, different calendar. During the day I still worked for Northline. Mark's calendar filled quickly. He scheduled standing meetings that went nowhere. He asked for status updates on systems he hadn't learned yet. I answered factually. I sent links. I took notes. Ellen started asking for more reports. Different formats. Slightly different numbers. I produced them without comment. At home, my apartment became quieter. Not calmer, just quieter. I slept 4 hours a night. I lost weight without noticing. My mother started calling every evening. I told her work was busy. By the end of the 2nd month, I had 3 clients. All small, all careful, none connected to Northline. I hired a contractor for design work, paid them on time, documented everything. At Northline, things started slipping. 2 people from my old team resigned within a week of each other. Ellen responded by adding more check-ins, daily ones, 8 a.m., cameras on. Client satisfaction scores dropped. Slowly at first. Then, all at once. When the Q2 survey results came back, the numbers weren't ambiguous. Responsiveness down, strategic confidence down, trust down. Ellen held an emergency meeting, 60 minutes of language without ownership. When she said, "We need to return to the level of service we had before," she looked directly at me. I didn't respond. That afternoon, I excused myself early. In the bathroom, I locked the stall and waited until the nausea passed. That weekend, I texted Caleb. We met outside the office, different cafe, no laptops. He looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before. I told him I was leaving. I told him I'd started my own firm. He didn't argue. He told me the board had pushed for the change, that he'd fought it, that he'd lost. I listened. Then I told him I'd give standard notice. When I told Ellen the next morning, her face changed before she could stop it, just for a moment. Fear, real and unfiltered. She asked about my plans. She mentioned contracts. She leaned forward when she spoke. I answered carefully, factually. Within an hour, my access was gone. HR walked me to my desk. Someone watched while I packed. A mug, a plant, a framed photo from a holiday party. Before I reached the elevator, my badge stopped working. By the time I got home, my phone was already buzzing. Not panic, not celebration. Questions. I didn't answer them right away. I sat at my kitchen table, opened my notebook, and wrote one more line beneath the others. Step 4. Let silence do its job. Then I closed the notebook and waited. The silence didn't last long. By the end of the week, I had 6 coffee meetings on my calendar. None of them were labeled as business. None of them needed to be. People talked carefully. They asked how I was adjusting. They asked what I was building. They avoided saying the word client out loud. I didn't push them to. Every conversation followed the same pattern. They described problems they were seeing, confusion, delays, price increases that hadn't been explained well. Then they paused, waiting. I listened. 3 days after my exit, Ellen sent an email to every Northline client. She framed it as a strategic enhancement, new leadership, revised pricing, an 18% increase justified by expanded services. I didn't comment. 2 clients forwarded me the message within an hour. Both asked the same question in different words. I didn't respond directly. I didn't need to. A week later, one client notified Northline they wouldn't be renewing when their term ended. Another followed soon after. Neither mentioned me. At the same time, my firm outgrew my calendar. I hired 2 people who had left Northline months earlier. Both came with notebooks full of process gaps they'd been carrying around quietly. We fixed them one by one. I leased a small office. 2nd floor. Windows that opened. A place where work stayed at work. Then the letter arrived. Cease and desist. Allegations of solicitation. A demand for client lists and communication logs. I didn't panic. I scanned it once. Then I forwarded it to a friend from law school who specialized in employment law. Her reply came back that evening. You're fine. They're posturing. She drafted the response. It was brief, precise. It cited dates. It quoted Ellen's own emails. It made clear that client decisions following price increases and service changes did not equal solicitation. The last paragraph noted that I had documented all interactions and would comply fully with discovery if litigation proceeded. We never heard back. By the 3rd month, my team had grown to 6. Revenue doubled, then stabilized. I slept again. That's when Caleb asked me to dinner. Not coffee, dinner, a quiet restaurant far from the office district. He didn't order wine. He told me the board was worried, that client losses were accelerating, that Ellen was blaming my departure. I told him that wasn't accurate. He asked me if I was trying to hurt the company. I said no. I said I was building something new. He didn't interrupt. When he finally made the offer, it came out slowly. A partnership, autonomy, a title, distance from the board. I listened. I let him finish. Then I told him I wasn't interested. He tried once more. Mentioned the client still there. The instability, the cost of competition. I paid the check. I thanked him for the opportunity. 2 days later, Ellen's departure was announced. A week after that, the venture group terminated their contract. I didn't celebrate. I reorganized my calendar and waited. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Unknown number, calm voice, professional cadence. She introduced herself as an executive recruiter, working with a venture group I knew very well. She mentioned one of their CEOs by name, someone I trusted. She asked if I had time to talk. I did. She explained that the group was restructuring how marketing was handled across their portfolio. Centralized, collaborative, long-term. They weren't looking to hire an employee. They were looking for a foundation. I didn't react. She asked if I'd consider a conversation. No commitments, no assumptions. We met the following week in a conference room that still smelled faintly of fresh paint. Glass walls, water carafe untouched. She slid a folder across the table but didn't open it. Instead, she asked questions. How I built teams. How I decided when systems were ready to scale. What I did when clients disagreed with strategy. I answered slowly, not defensively, not persuasively. At the end, she told me they were interested in acquiring my firm outright, keeping the team, keeping the brand, giving me full authority to build what they needed. She didn't push for an answer. 2 days later, Caleb called. He sounded relieved, then uneasy. He told me Ellen had been let go, that the board wanted a replacement immediately, that they were struggling to regain trust. He asked if I'd reconsider. I told him I had already decided. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain my feelings. I told him the timing no longer worked. He said the board was afraid of losing more ground. I said fear wasn't a strategy. We ended the call politely. That evening, I went back to the office and reviewed the numbers. Growth curves, capacity limits, hiring needs. Everything lined up cleanly. I signed the letter of intent the next morning. The final agreement took weeks. Lawyers on both sides, red lines, silence, progress. When it was done, I sat alone in my office after everyone left. The windows were open. Traffic hummed below. I organized my desk, threw away old notes, filed the rest. My phone buzzed once. A connection request. Ellen. I didn't accept it. I turned the phone face down. Then I went home. The acquisition closed on a Thursday. No announcement, no celebration, just a signed document, a wire confirmation, and a short email from the recruiter confirming board approval. By Friday morning, my firm officially became the operating foundation for the Venture Group's internal marketing collaborative. Same team, same workflows, expanded mandate. The first thing I did wasn't hire. I audited accounts, client timelines, capacity projections, risk points. Everything went into a shared folder. Nothing lived in my head alone anymore. Within 2 weeks, the contrast became visible without commentary. Campaign delivery stabilized. Response times shortened. Strategy meetings became quieter and shorter. One CEO sent a single sentence after a review call. This finally feels organized. At the same time, Northline's situation kept deteriorating. Former colleagues checked in carefully, not to gossip, to understand. The pattern was consistent. Clients weren't angry, they were confused. Promises kept changing. Pricing shifted without explanation. Systems were layered on top of each other without purpose. None of that involved me. Then the board made its move. They hired an outside consultant. Crisis management, short-term stabilization. The announcement framed it as a proactive measure. The numbers told a different story. Within a month, 5 more clients exited. The venture group finalized their withdrawal. Northline's valuation dropped sharply. I learned all of this secondhand. I wasn't tracking it. I didn't need to. One afternoon, Caleb emailed me directly, not asking for help, just an update. He said he understood now. He said he should have protected what worked instead of replacing it. I replied once, briefly. I wished him well. That was the last direct contact we had. The only document I printed that week was my new operating agreement. I placed it in the same drawer where my old employment contract used to live. Different language, different assumptions. That weekend, I went into the office alone. I cleaned the whiteboards, labeled the cabinets, threw out boxes we no longer needed. I made tea, sat by the window, watched the river move. There was no rush anymore, no one waiting for me to prove anything. I closed my laptop at 5 and left it closed. The move into the new office happened quietly. No ribbon, no speeches, just boxes, plants, and a checklist taped to the door. I arrived early the first morning and wiped down my desk myself. Old habit, one I decided to keep. I set up my mug, plugged in the lamp, arranged the files so everything I needed was visible and nothing extra was in reach. Outside, traffic moved steadily. Inside, it was calm. That afternoon, I took a walk along the river during lunch. The water was high from recent rain. Slow, steady, deliberate. I stood there longer than necessary and realized something had changed. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for validation, not for permission, not for someone else to confirm what I already knew. A few weeks later, a former colleague called. Someone at a different firm, different city, similar story. A quiet demotion, a role reassigned without explanation. They asked how I knew when it was time to stop enduring and start building. I told them the truth. I didn't know at first. I just knew when silence stopped feeling like safety and started feeling like preparation. That's been happening more often lately. People reaching out, not angry, just tired. Capable people being managed out of the work they built. I listen when I can. Most days now end the same way. I straighten my desk. I shut down my computer. I walk home without checking my phone. At night, I sleep. Sometimes I think about that first coffee meeting, the lukewarm cup, the careful words, how certain she sounded, how final it all seemed. She never saw the systems, or the notes, or the patience. She never saw what I carried quietly. And that's fine. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. If it felt familiar, you're not alone. Take a second to like the video and subscribe if you want more real stories like this. Let me know in the comments what city you're watching from, and what time it is right now where you are. 2 more stories will be up next. You might recognize parts of them too.